Welcome to the Vox for YouTube. It's me again, your pal Nani, back again with another Let's Explain of Victoria 2, Heart of Darkness. You might notice I sound a little bit different this time, a little bit lower quality. That's because my old microphone decided to finally give up on me, which is not very surprisingly considering right now that even the headset part is just a horrible Frankenstein of electrical tape and wire. So I'm right now having to use my standby. So, I apologize for any lower quality in this video. Now, this episode we're going to go over production, going to go a little bit over the general aspects of it, what Hearts of Darkness introduces and twists on the concept, as well as an added bonus, the crisis system. Now, starting off, I'm just going to say, you might remember back in the AHD era, I promised that I was going to make an actual video about this, and I ended up sort of putting it off because Heart of Darkness is coming out, and of course I was expecting it to change a little bit more than it actually did. So, with that being said, it really didn't change so much, so this is going to be for anyone, vanilla, House Divided, or Hearts of Darkness. Just basically how to build your factories. So, starting off, there's two basic ways to actually build a factory. The first is, if you have state capitalism, that's going to be your reactionary and fascist parties, or if you have planned economy, which is going to be your socialist and communist parties, in a general sense for both of those. Some reactionary parties only have interventionism and the like. That's going to enable you to actually directly build factories. There's a few components to building factories. The first thing is your actual down payment, which is, for instance, if we want to build a glass factory in Biden, $8,979.94. Well, 8,979 euros and 94 pence. Well, pounds and 94 pence, you know what I mean. So what this is you're going to basically, just depending on what your actual factory is, the location it's going to be in, it's going to need a different amount of down payment, and it also is going to be varied a little bit based on the actual goods you need. Now, the goods you need are not actually going to be part of your down payment. It's just going to be, they're just going to be added in after the fact. So you'll lose the 8.1k as soon as you build the factory, and then the remaining 0.96, the remaining money is going to go into buying your resources for the actual factory. The resources are generally going to be these same three things: cement, machine parts, and iron, except in a few cases where it's, say, I just had it. A few of them need timber for it. Yeah, the cement factory needs timber for its resource. Or say we can find machine parts. Well, machine parts still needs machine parts, but there's only a few exceptions to the rule. It's generally going to be these. Fair lot of these, but as I said, you actually only buy these after the fact. So as long as you have enough money to put down the factory as is, you can save up money and actually get the resources later if you are really to that state. Now, these factories, I did build a practice one. If I can see if I can find it. Here it is. These factories take a good amount of time to actually build, depending on, as I said, what they are and where they are. As you can see, this one is these both took about 700 days, but some things make your factories build faster, others slower. This I haven't really found out what actually causes it yet, and I've actually got half an inkling that it might be just from how slow or fast you get your resources to the factory. And after this, you get to, let's see if I can find the other test factory I had. Aha! Hezernasau, I believe. Yeah. After this, you get to the opening few days. The opening few days are going to be marketed by everyone of the culture who's unemployed going to this province and signing up for a job at this factory. As you can see, the factory in its first few days of operation gets a massive $1,000 bonus, so it can actually hire employees to fill it up, after which point it'll stop making such, a massive profit and go back down to normal means. But in that time you should have a fair amount of people actually join that factory. And to explain this algorithm further, as far as Hearts of Darkness and I believe Patched A House Divided go, the actual workers that are going to come to your factory come from your culture. Of course, primary or accepted are going to move between each other, like if you're the German Empire and with North and South German as cultures, North and South Germans who are unemployed anywhere are going to go to, say, if we built a factory in Saxony, they go to there for work instead of just sitting in their province and, not working. But if we had, say, Polish people or French people unemployed, they stay in their home territory, say Luxembourg or Alsace-Lorraine, or, of course, Polish parts of the German Empire, and only try to find work there, which could be a little bit of a problem if you have a real unemployment problem in those areas. Of course, the obvious solution is to find something the factories are good at and build them in those locations. The other way you can build factories is if you're, say, a democracy and you can't just VoIP to reactionary policies like monarchies can, then you're going to have to rely on your capitalists. Now, this is a bit of a harder way to do it. If you're a smaller nation, you're really not going to be able to make industrialized by these means, because I would recommend using a national focus for these guys. Capitalists are the lifeblood of a non-reactionary economy. Heck, that's why they call it state capitalism, because, of course, the state is working as a capitalist. But under interventionism or laissez-faire, you can only count on these guys to actually make your factories. And what this is going to do is, sometimes your capitalists are going to start a project. They have none currently, but in most situations, particularly with lower taxes on the rich and lower tariffs, they're going to start to do that. And what this is going to basically, it's going to essentially be like you're building the factory if you've got interventionism, because it lets you invest. And what this basically does, it lets you pick and choose which companies win and lose. And, of course, that's probably for the best benefit, so you don't have 1,000 factories just draining your state economy and making you go bankrupt. So, your capitalists will say, try to build a winery in South Tyrol, like these ones did. Your capitalists are going to band together from whatever province they're in and start actually trying to build a factory. Once they're done with that, and the benefit to actually having capitalists instead of having the state run that, is once they actually build the factories, they're going to move to where the factories are, if they're in the primary culture, like what happened in Silesia, or Schlesien up here. They're going to move to places their primary culture, accepted culture, with factories in them, and start managing them. And as you can see, if we compare, say, what's happening in Schlesien to what's happening in Tyrol, where there's no capitalists at all, generally, the capitalists basically help everything. They help input, output, all sorts of efficiencies, cut down how much resources you actually need and how much you're actually making. And also, they, of course, if they're successful, they're going to be able to invest in more factories. So, that is generally a good thing. Any capitalist that invests, well, any capitalist gets money, at least a little bit, from factories in general of their province. The actual algorithm is sort of mysterious, to be honest, and basically it can be summed up as, if there's capitalists there, they're making money. So, with that being said, there was something else. Oh yeah. The actual problem with capitalists, though, is that it's very difficult to just sort of break the bounds and become a capitalist yourself. You're generally going to have to encourage capitalists with one of your national focuses. Of course, there's the mighty German Empire, which I cheated to bring into existence, as you could probably guess. We've got several national foci and several actual places to put them down, and don't have to compete with encouraged soldiers or officers or anything, so we're not going to have to basically retool into an industrialized nation. But if you're in a place like, oh, say, Chile, where you don't have too many regions, you don't have too many of your primary population as your national focus, it's going to be actually a lot harder to get these, which is why as Latin American countries or smaller European countries or the like, you're generally going to be a lot better off by simply encouraging reactionary, or if you're blessed, conservative parties into power, at which point they can become, at which you can just use state capitalism to kickstart your own economy. There is incidentally one exception to this rule, which is inexplicably South Africa, where the Liberal Party is a state capitalist one and the reactionary is only interventionist. It's a weird system they got down there. But aside from that, the general rule is going to still be the same. Now let's talk about your positioning, because in Heart of Darkness, that's going to be actually a major part of it. This is where your RGO output view is going to come in really handy. Let's just start with an easy example. I want to build a steel factory. Now, if we look at the production screen, we can see steel requires coal and iron. In previous games, you would just scoff at that, build railroads in your iron and coal producing provinces and put them in your capital city or whatever your highest population province was. But in Heart of Darkness, let's say you were, for some reason, your capital was Stuttgart because you were a weird, specific cheater who wanted the whole German Empire to be Wittenberg. As you can see, Wittenberg has fruit and grains only. In Hearts of Darkness, you're not going to really get much use out of your factory if you put it there. Conversely, if you decided to put it in Bohemia up here, which is nothing but iron and coal, you're going to get a lot more mileage out of it, because putting factories in like provinces now gives you, of course, better industrialization. It helps here. This is really where the reason they got rid of everything in power is because all that throughput is now due to your province, not your technologies. So, a lot of your factory work now is about actual location. Of course, there are still a few ways to get around this if you really don't, you really don't want to put a factory down in a province for some reason, but you generally can make the term that you want to put factories down in like provinces, and of course, as you would logically expect, factories build on each other's goods. So if you put down a steel factory in Prague, and then let's say you want to build an ammo factory, or a small arms factory, as long as you've got some ammo income coming in from somewhere else, you're also going to get a massive income there, because the steel is going to feed into the small arms factory. So that you essentially, to an extent, you profile your factories now, as bad as that sounds. So you can essentially make Bohemia, where all your military goods are from, or you can make, say, one of the South German areas where they make grain and fruit, where you get a lot of your alcohol and wine and other fine luxury goods like that. So that's basically that. And in addition, let's talk a little bit about a few resources while we're looking at this screen. First things first is precious metal. Precious metal is sort of we're starting with this just to get it out of the way, really. We've lost a lot of precious metal in the conversion from a House Divided to Heart of Darkness. As you can see, we got precious metal in Königsberg, and there's a fair amount in Europe now, basically none in Central Asia or Russia, just spotted throughout the map in general. This is a result of the actual world of the 1860s and 1870s, because when the game starts, you have a whopping 2 precious metal provinces. Now, precious metal feeds directly into your budget, so it's really useful, as long as your RGOs are any good. And one of the problems is, incidentally, that one of the gold-producing provinces from default is Metz, so unless you're Prussia, you're probably not going to be able to actually get a major hold of that. It will pop up more and more over the course of the game, particularly in, say, Latin America, where we have Peru and Chile both making it now. But when the game starts, there's not going to be very much of it. But that's really not too industrial, so let's talk about the real two goods we're out after here. Iron and coal. Iron and coal they were made rarer in A House Divided all the way back then. Believe the patch version, not just retail. And now there is a lot of demand for it, as you can probably guess. With the new system of how factories work, inefficient factories are going to want a lot of this stuff. So, get iron, get coal, period. Of course, there's only one real major, there's only two real major areas of actual steel and iron and coal production. Those are going to be Bohemia and Saxony, well, the Bohemia and Saxony areas, and the Germanic states, well, the whole Czech area, and Saxony, with Erfurt, of course, and the Germanic areas, and the Rhineland in just Prussia. There's going to be a few places, like Belgium, where a little bit is made, and of course, I believe every great power starts with at least one iron and one coal province, even places like Italy, as we can see, Parma, and there's another one, I just can't find it right now, for coal. But, with that being said, just make sure you get some iron and coal. As you can see, Persia has a fair bit of iron, as Siam, the Philippines if you really want to start a colonial war, and Korea, big part, and China all have a little bit of iron to spare. And as for coal, that's going to be a lot more common. Not common as coal, though. A lot more countries are going to start out with this and have more of a wealth with this, but if you need some, again, Persia, parts of India, if you really want to tussle with the UK, China's got it in spades, as long as, well, China doesn't really need to control this place to have a lot, but it helps. Japan and Korea. Korea, especially now that it's independent again, is pretty much where you go for industrialization, because they got iron and coal in North Korea, oddly. So, that's basically just the recommended thing to do. So, now that all of that's explained, well, first we're going to talk a little bit about industrial technology. If you just missed the last sorry about that voice crack. If you just missed the last episode, power is sort of out now. Well, I mean, it's out for direct factory purposes. It only affects the RGOs now until the very top technology, which you're going to get in Space Year 1900, 36 years before the end of the game. So for the majority of the game, this isn't really going to do much for you as far as directly making factories goes, but it is going to give you a lot of help in actually producing your goods needed for factories, because even sometimes in efficient areas, like say if you built a factory in Magdeburg with one whole iron province to it, even though that iron's going to be there, you're probably not going to have enough if you have just Erfurt. So, making sure that your RGOs are efficient is still a big part of maintaining your industrialization. As you can guess, mechanization has gotten a little bit of a buff, and of course, as you can, factory cost isn't just assembly line and shift work, it's now semi-automation as well, which is only a little ways into the game. So that's going to help you a lot with your factories, and considering it helps throughput, which only location and electrical power generation actually help you with, that's going to be a big part of your actual industrialization. If nothing else, if you're like a GP who doesn't really need that much help making factories, at least research this to make them cheaper and that much more efficient. They also give you, of course, technologies like Fordism, industrialized armament, refrigerator technology, which all help your RGOs out a lot in factories even more so. Metallurgy is really important now, just crazy important to actually have, because there's always going to be a demand for iron, coal, and precious metal now, and anything that helps you make more of that stuff is going to boost your economy like crazy. Of course, the steel efficiency and iron efficiency inventions you're going to get from these aren't going to do much harm to you either. Chemistry and electricity is still pretty much what it is. A supply limit is the main feature, but it also lets you build new factories later down the line. Railroads are generally important. If you remember, it's actually harder to build railroads now. Like, say, if we wanted to in Switzerland, we actually can't because the mountains are too just hard on our actual rail system technology. So but conversely, since Heart of Darkness, they've got a massive buff. We are making 48% more RGO output and factory throughput efficiency in Brandenburg just from how our rail system is in there. And that's just the beginning. It's just crazy almost how much rails actually help you now. But as said, if you're a place like, say, Chile, where most of your provinces are mountainous or hilly or just dangerous in other regards, generally not actually such a great idea to invest too much into them in the early game. Of course, in the late game, you're going to be able to get around that. Not too much, because you're only going to build like level 1 railroads, but it's still going to help you considerably. Especially considering that generally in Latin America, generally outside of the Germanic area, if you've got iron or coal, it's going to be in a mountain province. So, finally, we're going to talk a little bit about crises. And of course, my last take I had a crisis going, but now I sort of don't, so we're going to cut out, and I'm going to come back in once I've actually got a crisis going. Be right back. Alright, now we're back. As you can see, I've let a factory go bankrupt. Oops. Wow, it's a steel factory in Bohemia. I'm just trying to point out how big of a hypocrite I am. So anyway, as we can see now, the Ottoman Empire has started tensions over trying to free Poland. As you know from the basis of this, if you've seen the trailers or played a little bit of this, there's essentially 2 options you get per crisis, and of course if you don't actually take a side by the time it fizzles out, you lose quite a bit of prestige. So there's 3 basic parts to this, as the screen very politely shows. We've got your the actual person who's trying to get something done with the crisis, in this case Poland, backed by the Ottoman Empire, attempting to get the Russian Empire, something for the Russian Empire. In this case it's the liberation of their actual home territory. In the middle is all the great powers that are actually on the fence about it. And what this actually is going to be is basically great powers determine for their own if they actually are interested in the crisis or not. If the outcome of the crisis means nothing to them, of course they generally don't even intervene. Let's just, for instance, of course we get the Ottoman Empire and Russian Empire as default who's fighting, but we got on the fence the UK, who's #1 in the world and is basically going to take part in every crisis no matter what actually happens. Spain, who is really clinging on to the actual hope of still being a GP by getting itself involved in a crisis it really has nothing to do with. Belgium, who's very new to the scene and is just sort of trying to say that it matters. Generally 6th through 8th are going to always be part of the crisis. And of course me, because, you know, I control more Polish provinces than like anyone. So it'd be pretty much suicidal to back the Ottomans and free Poland, because you know what's going to happen very soon. They're just going to come after my own. So we want to support the Russian Empire. Of course, everyone else has their own actual decisions. Since everyone really loves Germany, of course, people are really just sort of trying to back the Russian Empire now, because their political interests are really helping us out, and no one who's involved in this crisis really wants to see a free Poland that bad. As you can see, the Free Poland war goal is sort of turning all of them off. The actual determination of the countries that are going to be backing are generally made of 3 things. As you can see, political considerations are basically how much the nation just supports the target or attacker, as I like to call them. For instance, Belgium really doesn't care too much for me, but they sort of like the Russian Empire, and they were at war with the Ottomans before, so that's clearly out for an option for them. So, Belgium is going to try and go for the Russian Empire. Spain is sort of in the middle, doesn't really like either of us, except for the Russian Empire. And also, it also seems to have some sort of plan, I suppose. Political considerations are also generally the AI being the AI, so if they have an interest in Poland actually being a free nation, they're going to go the Ottoman Empire. But if they really don't want Poland to be in existence because it'll mess with their ally or something, they're going to always side with the defender. The UK is sort of on the fence now because they're friendly with the Ottoman Empire, and as number one in the world, they always try to support the free one at least a little. Well, they're number two now, but the UK considers itself number one in the world unless the United States or France is holding that position. Since it's me, you know, it's not going to be much of it's not really going to change its actual behavior much. But it doesn't really have much of an interest in free Poland, but it doesn't really have much of an interest in us either. But it has such a they don't want to support Poland so much that they're going to side with us. There are a few other rules, particularly with who is actually going to join. Like, say, the United States is almost completely isolationist and will generally never join any sort of crisis. France is only going to join ones that they're going to side with the offense and directly get benefits because they're, you know, France, and they don't want to be on the losing side of anything. And just things like that. The Ottomans will never support Russia or vice versa. So, with all that, there's this little beauty. You see, if, say, we were even, if, say, the UK and Belgium went with the Ottomans while Spain decided to join up with the Russian Empire, we would have roughly equal odds, and at that point, neither side would be willing to back down. This thing would fill up, and as you can see, when that thing fills up, it turns into a crisis war. Now, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, well, right now actually, you can, as you could probably see from me hovering over this, because that's how you see which way they're going, you can try to bribe a nation into taking a war goal against the defender. If overwhelming odds go against the defender, they're going to back down hard enough to actually surrender that, at which point everyone on that side is going to lose a lot of prestige, and of course the war goal is going to be enacted. But if the war goal is still part of it when the war actually breaks out, you better be bloody ready to fight for not only the crisis but also that, because it's kind of just for a crisis war, where it's similar to the Great Power War, where you can't just wipe peace out unless you're the defender and you have no war goals, and you can't call in any allies. There's no true war leader, except for the actual pressing and defending. It's not based really on military power. And essentially those are sort of nasty wars to be involved with. And if there's a lot of crazy going on in Europe, it's probably because Prussia, Austria, or France actually lost a great power, or a crisis war from that. And of course later on, crisis wars will evolve into great wars, which are all sorts of fun. So, with that being said, always make sure that if you're going to back a side, that you know you're not going to get into some horrifying, awful war by doing so, or at least you can fight it. So, let's end this off with just one more little explanation, the two actual types of crisis and how they start. There's two basic types of crises. The more common one is going to be secondary or civilized nation versus secondary or great power. Let's take this example, even though this is sort of long gone the opportunity for it. The Netherlands starts out with cores on all of Belgium. And they, of course, you can't take capitals by crisis. Or annex. So what the Netherlands can do is they have a special little national focus that they can stake in, say, Wallonia. This is going to contribute to the flashpoint. You can't actually see it here anymore. Let's go somewhere where it will be. South Serbia. And let's just switch the scenario over here, just for convenience sake. So Serbia is going to put its national focus for flashpoint increase on the Ottoman Empire. There's a lot of things that actually go into the flashpoint. As you can see, most of them are actually pretty minuscule modifiers. Things like the great powers being at war or an active crisis already being involved is basically going to shut down your flashpoint no matter what's going to happen, because no one wants to get into even more war, especially with somebody they might be allied with. Conversely, though, if, say, there's a major liberation movement in southern Serbia, or you've just been hammering them with a national focus for the whole game, and they're starting to decline as a power, it's going to be able to more easily spark an actual crisis for it. And when that crisis starts, of course, you just go to where we are now, just squabbling over things, and just the crisis will be set in motion. The other kind of crisis is what's actually happening now, the new country crisis. If you're really doing things pretty badly, and your liberation movements are destroying you, and say you're declining as a power, etc., etc., you're going to eventually, if you're a multi-ethnical empire like the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, or the Austrian Empire in particular, going to have things like this happen. Basically, what's actually happening is citizens from, say, Poland are getting together and saying, hey, we need to make a new government, and sending representatives to all the great powers to ask who's actually going to support that. And this could be anyone. It tends to start with the actual strongest and work down, unless, say, you have cores on Poland like I do. But that's generally how it works. That's strongest by military score, not overall score, incidentally. So it's going to go down the list, and whoever actually backs it is going to become crisis leader instead of, say, for the offense, instead of, say, the Netherlands having to find their own backer by whoever's steering them. So that's basically how the new crisis system works, and new nation crisis and existing nation crisis systems work. So that was a mouthful, but hey, there's a few things I need to finally say before we wrap things up here. First, this is Atlas Month. Every week I'm going to be talking about a new nation on Steam as part of my guides. You might remember I made an overall guide for starting nations a few weeks back. So, this is going to be just a lot of... how do I put this? It's going to be a lot of little starting nations that I'd really like to cover on, say, Let's Explain Victoria 2, but I just can't find enough to say about them. Like last week's was Chile. I really couldn't fit that into an actual LAV2 specific nation episode. So, I'm going to be doing that every week on Saturday on my channel. This is also going to be the official restarting of my channel, as you could probably guess. Another attempt at least. And, finally, if you want to see another new nation in Atlas Month, or if you just want me to say something next time on Let's Explain Victoria 2, leave a comment on there or these videos, and I'll try to get back to you. Next week's episode for the Let's Explain is going to be the new military and naval systems in further depth, and next time on the actual Kaiser Nani's Atlas entries, we're going to be talking about a little bitty country around here that I don't particularly care for. So, with all that being said, now's also one last little thing. We have a new little beta patch on the forums, and a lot of things I said in my last video are now corrected by that, such as you might notice Portuguese Angola and Mozambique being actual places now. So, that's all fine and dandy. So I'd say if you've been really apprehensive about trying a HOD, try this new patch. It helps a lot of things. So yeah, next time military, keep track of the Kaiser Nani's Atlas on Steam. Drop me a line on Steam or on YouTube if you don't actually know how to get to those. And Wednesday we're going to be talking about something, or Thursday we're going to be talking about something new. So until then, good night, folks. This is your Kaiser signing off.